Hello, and thank you again for joining us today. My name is Nathan Rolfe, and I'm the president of the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces and your host for this segment. On behalf of the Tortora Brayda Institute and the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces, I would like to welcome you to this month's episode of our Cyber Workforce Series, where we speak with cyber professionals about their careers and journeys to help inform others on the diversity of paths within the cybersecurity industry and hopefully support you, the listener, on your own personal cyber career journey. Before we meet this month's guests, I'd like to share a little information about the two organizations that make this series possible, the Tortora Brayda Institute and the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces. The Tortora Brayda Institute was created to promote collaboration across public and private sectors with a focus on business, culture, and diversity. Tortora Brayda looks to reshape and develop collaboration and partnering practices with a view to improving and securing businesses and economies. A core concept of the Institute is their think tank for partnership in AI and cybersecurity. The think tank has allowed Tortora Brayda to bring together experts and leaders from the public and private sectors and academia around the world to reshape and develop collaboration and partnering practices while embracing the most critical technology growth. If you are not currently a member of the Institute, we invite you to visit their website at www.tortorabrayda.org to learn more and see how you can participate. The Association of U.S. Cyber Forces is a nonprofit professional association that provides the voice for members of the cyber workforce who serve in the military, government agencies, industry, and academia on specific cyber issues impacting national security. AUSCF is an advocate for positive change to policies and programs that better serve their membership and help minimize gaps between the private and public sector cybersecurity efforts. If you would like to learn more or join AUSCF, please visit our website at www.auscf.org. During today's discussion, please feel free to drop any questions that you have into the chat, and as time allows, we will attempt to weave those answers into our discussion as we move forward. Your questions and feedback help directly shape this and our future events. Today's guest is Les Aker. Les is a computer scientist and cryptographer who is currently enjoying semi-retirement and also serves as the Chief Technology Officer of the South Carolina Emergency Tech Association. He spent most of his career working at the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C., specifically in the Center for High Assurance Systems. Among his more than 40 years of experience hacking and securing computer systems, Les spent time as the lead investigator, reporting to the Navy's Inspector General for all hacking incidents. He handled hundreds of investigations with more than 90% rate of case closure. His effectiveness and means of investigation earned him a complimentary comparison to the old Columbo detective character from the days before streaming television. Les has a bachelor's degree in computer science from West Virginia University. He is also a founder and owner of his own consulting company, a serial entrepreneur, and serves as a board member or advisor for several other organizations focused on technology and security. Les, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just go ahead and start in a logical place, the beginning. Your experience goes back over 40 years. How did you get started in computer science back then?
I kind of fell into it. I started out as an engineering major and then took a couple of computer classes and decided that I would change my major because I liked the computer classes better. And along the way, I realized that most of the people in the program were a lot smarter than I was, and I needed an edge, or at least I felt like I needed an edge. And to get that edge, I started hacking the university system. And so if we were slow because there were a lot of jobs being executed and I could only get one run a day, that was hard. If I could get an edge and convince the computer to give me 3 or 4 runs a day, I was doing a lot better. And that's really what started my hacking career. And so I learned at the time there weren't tools and things. I had to poke around in the system and figure out how to increase the priority of my tasks and get my compile job back a lot faster. So that's how the hacking started. And at the time, there weren't all these messy laws about hacking. So when I was ready to graduate, some gentlemen showed up to interview and recruit some of us. And you got to understand that cyber didn't exist the way that we think of cyber now. There wasn't really terminology for cyber. We had signals intelligence, SIGINT, and we had communications security, ComSec, and they were opposing forces, much the same way that electronic warfare and radar use the same technology and they're opposing forces. So the guys who came to interview me, who had a reasonable belief that I had been folding, spindling, and mutilating the university computer, had no way to really say, we want you to do a cyber job for us. So what they said to me was, we're looking for someone who can make our computers do impossible things. We have a bunch of electrical engineers and they program, and we're trying to build cryptographic devices, and we have kind of reached the limit of what we can do as electrical engineers. And now we're having to use computers more. So we need someone who can show us how to make our computers do impossible things. Are you interested in doing that? And I thought, that sounded like a great idea. And next thing I knew, I was working for the Navy as a civilian employee.
That's like almost a movie plot of this student in college just trying to look out for themselves, almost kind of like you're saying, trying to get your edge. And here comes the guys in the black suits to say, hey, we've got some talents.
And I make a point of not talking about hacking until twice the statute of limitations has gone by. But at this point, I will admit that early in my college career, I got waitlisted for a class, and that really concerned me because if you missed a class in the fall, you couldn't get into the spring class. It set you back a year. There were lots of implications. So I got into that class even though I was on the wait list. But after that, I had a really deep conversation with the university computer that handled class scheduling. And we came to an agreement pretty fast that my education was more important than that. So I was never waitlisted for another class.
I'm glad that you used your powers for good instead of evil shortly after college in this case.
So yeah, so that was one of the edges that I needed. But luckily, the computer understood how important my education was.
Well, it's good that you had that talk.
So I launched off basically into a ComSec job. At the time, we didn't have CompuSec, we didn't have cyber. It was a communication security job, and they wanted us to figure out how to use computers to do better ComSec.
And so is that your path into the Navy Research Laboratory then?
Yeah, I went into the ComSec section in the Information Technology Division, which eventually all got recombobulated into the Center for High Assurance Systems. And that's where I really learned how to be a cryptographer, a real cryptographer, and how to do computer math to do cryptography. Because at that time, NSA had a hard no. They had decreed that there would never be certification of cryptography and encryption and key management and things using software because they just didn't trust it.
That attitude's flipped a little bit recently.
It has, and I mean, one of the very first projects that I got assigned to was called the Naval Key Distribution System, NKDS. And if I told you that 40 years ago, some people would have been really upset. But now there's a Wikipedia page about it. And it evolved into the Electronic Key Management System, EKMS, run by NSA. They basically stole our idea and implemented it as their key management infrastructure. But it was, how do you create and manage electronic keys, all the key management features inside of a computer. And to tell you how old that is, we did the initial prototype using a Tempest 286 Zenith processor. Which probably isn't even in the Smithsonian at this point.
Some of our younger listeners may not have any idea what you're talking about. You start using the 86 numbers.
The Tempest meant they were very worried about electronic emissions, so it had control so that no electrons could spray out of the system. And a 286 processor is ancient.
That's awesome. So I think you've made it when your job is actually got a Wikipedia article or things related to it, or if you go to the Cryptologic Museum outside of Fort Meade and see things you used to work on in the museum.
Yeah.
But all right, let's talk a little bit more about the cryptography piece of it. I think a lot of people currently, when they hear crypto or cryptography, they're thinking cryptocurrency. You're obviously from a very different place with that. What can you talk a little bit more about?
Sure.
to the degree you can about what you were able to do with
Yeah.
cryptography
So,
at the time.
and I will say I do blockchain and ledger technology things now. And it was a very easy transition for me. I kind of just fell right across that when a friend asked me a bunch of questions one day because he was thinking about mining Bitcoin, because the algorithms and hashing and data encoding that is used in cryptocurrencies and in blockchain technology generally is exactly what we were working on back then. It's exactly the same concepts to get over into public key infrastructure and how hashing works, and that we use base 58 encoding because all the characters are printable, things like that. So an easy transition over. But back then, we were looking at how computers impact cryptography and how fast a computer could go through and exhaust the key space or find an algorithm. So we were working on how to make new cryptographic systems that covered that, because we were the computer security side, the communication security side of the house. So we wanted to thwart those signals intelligence people and have good secure communications. So we, at the time I was there in the lab, we worked on KG84s, KY58s and 59s and things that are now very old cryptographic systems, but they were some of the initial systems that used the new technology to say we have a good algorithm, we have good key management, um, and we can do a much better job of doing communication between ships.
That's awesome. So you talk about how essentially the transition was easy. You mentioned very earlier on, you kind of self-taught yourself computer math.
Yeah.
Now, if someone's, I think a lot of people miss that application of math to things like cryptography, and whether it's the security piece that you used to work in or more of the blockchain that you see now.
Yeah. Well, and this is something that I think isn't well taught in colleges now. Uh, I was fortunate to have a good numerical analysis teacher who I hated at the time, but it turns out he was a good at pounding numerical analysis into me. Uh, so I'll explain it this way. When we have real math and you write something up on the board, you can't say x equals x plus 1, because that's not a valid statement in real math, but it's a valid statement in computer math because it's an assignment statement. So we're assigning numbers to variables in memory. And when we're doing cryptography on a board, we're doing calculus to do it. Uh, you don't have the same problems that you do inside of a computer that's base 2, that's doing binary. For example, if you put a real number into a computer and you say, what is 0.1? The computer is really going to represent that inside its register in the CPU as 0.099999998. And it's going to print it out to you as 0.1. But the math it's doing is 0.099999998. And when you keep adding up all of those approximations, you create an error. You have a loss of accuracy. And that accuracy is very important inside of cryptography when we're doing divisions and public key infrastructure, where you're doing modulo arithmetic to do the divisions of very, very large prime numbers that I'll just say are that big. And so you introduce error into the computer program. So at a certain level, NSA was correct. That error made the application of cryptography using our standard Fortran or Pascal or PL1 programming bad, because it was very easy to introduce weaknesses into the algorithm that then got put into a machine that then was easy to break. So we had to go back as computer scientists and say, how do we account for that? How do we alleviate the error? How do we compensate for the lack of accuracy and correct ourselves and validate things better such that we are sure of the math that the math is being implemented correctly inside the computer, because computer math is not whiteboard math.
There's no real like college class for that anymore. So now you're really having to learn on the job.
Yeah, and I was lucky. I had 3 or 4 really good mentors who, had been in the business for a long time, and they could sit down and explain a lot of these concepts and how they had been doing it from the electrical engineering and physics side of it. And they could help me through the process of programming it and debugging it and evaluating it and looking at the output. And remember, back then we had 16-bit registers and 32-bit registers and things, so we had much smaller numbers that we could chunk and work with. And then hopefully I was able to help them get a better handle on how the computer was thinking. Or as we used to say back then, I'm going to teach you to talk to your computer, and then I want to teach you how to understand what your computer said back to you.
It's almost like training a dog owner how to communicate with their pet.
Absolutely. Yes, because you say you do things with the computer and it gives you some data back in a dump, or as output from a program. And there's an art. It's not really a science. There's an art to understanding how to read that and then resolve the error discrepancies and the lack of accuracy in very precise numbers.
So when you talk about an art, it's an abstract, non-tangible thing to really grasp. Your computer science degree goes back a little ways. How did you actually keep up with the technology as it changed to essentially advance your own state of the art and your ability to keep up with the changes in technology going forward?
Well, fortunately, I was at a very good research lab, and the people there understood that part of staying up was having time to read and study. So I was given time, a couple of hours a day minimum, to study and try new things and go down to the library and get the latest books and all the latest material that other researchers were coming out with, to be able to go back and look at and go and ask those people questions. So as opposed to just having to crank through the same stuff every day, we actually had time to continue through that process of learning and relearning the pieces. It was a wonderful atmosphere for a young guy who, every day figured out that there were new things that he didn't know about computers.
That's awesome. What do you do now? You're not there anymore, obviously, as we mentioned.
No, I'm
semi-retired,
here.
but
yes, I'm here in the home office, and I still have a few clients that I work with. They send me a note, an email, or call me, and I work on different math problems and things for them, or I look at their systems, or I help them figure out what their threat is, or how to implement something new into their system. And then on the emerging tech side, for them, we are the statewide lobby in South Carolina. So South Carolina is working on the tech economy here, and we put forward and help them draft bills and things to help change the way that tech is implemented here. Right now, we have bills for digital assets, data centers, power management, and some other things in front of the South Carolina legislature.
you obviously have resources now that you didn't have back when you first started with NRL, blogs, podcasts, multiple websites, YouTube, everything that's out there. Are there any particular go-tos that you have now for keeping abreast of the latest technology or keeping your skills at a modern pace?
Well, all of the above that you have there. Also, we have a technical college and a branch in the University of South Carolina here in this area, and I'm an advisor for their cyber programs and things. So I can go down there and try a few things and talk to their students and see some of the things that they're working on now. But I do spend time here on my big screen that's out of sight every day watching a few YouTubes and looking to see what other people are doing and downloading and reading research papers, because you're never standing still in this business. Every time I reach a point where somebody says, that's not possible, you can't do that way, just give it a couple of months and somebody's going to come up with, a method that they want you to try or some new hypothesis for something that will work.
That's great. You talk about kind of how people work in the modern workforce in this regard. One thing I didn't see in your profile was any of the standard professional certifications, Security Plus, CISSP, things like that. Do you just not list those, or do you not have any?
I have none of them.
So it's obviously
I actually teach some of those
changed.
classes. I just finished a Security Plus class, the last Zoom for the 12-week session last night. So I teach a bunch of them, but I hold none of the certifications.
There's no doubt that you have the knowledge and skill set to do so. But for the modern individual trying to get into this workforce or trying to grow in there,
Yeah.
you've succeeded without it. Is it still possible to do so, or do folks need to pursue those degrees, pursue those certifications? What's that right path today
Well,
for somebody to kind of get where you're at?
I was fortunate that I already had an established reputation professionally before those certifications became quite so important. And most of the students that I work with now, I recommend that they get a couple of the certifications simply because the people who are scanning their resumes are going to look for them. So they're going to need them much more than I did or I ever will. I can't remember the last time I got a job based on a resume. But the students that I'm advising are not in that state. So having a Security Plus or a CISSP or something like that is much more important to them to be able to show that they have a professional credential. Because when I was doing it, we all knew each other because there were very few of us. And there was not this grind to have this many professionals out in the business.
So, like you said, it's a different world. There's a lot more folks. The workforce is, even though we're probably still short staffed, it's still saturated a lot more than it was when you started your career. Do you have any recommendations that you give to students or to some of those folks early on in the workforce to find ways to set themselves apart from their peers? Say, hey, this is how you can stand out.
I have lots of recommendations. People don't listen to most of them, but I'm used to people ignoring what I tell them.
That's why we're here. Let's
That's
hear what
why
you
we're
got.
here. No, I'll tell you. So something I think that like Network Plus and Security Plus are good things to start with because they're differentiators, and they show that you have a baseline core set of information. I think it's also important to be able to take a machine apart and really understand what's going on inside of it, and most programs aren't teaching that. I rub a lot of people the wrong way when I tell them that I don't believe that there's any such thing as an ethical hacker, and that the ethical hacker certification is just a placeholder, because none of us are really that ethical. It all depends upon who's paying us and how much they're paying us. That all of those ethics are somewhat flexible in that situation. So you can go and get that certification, but please understand that you need to judge your own ethics, and it's not really rated against the certification.
And we're not advocating that anyone break any rules or laws in this program. But no,
No,
I think it's
we're
actually
not.
a great way to look at it because it's the mindset. I think that comes into it a lot more in that skill set, right? The ability
That's right.
for those students to kind of push that limit.
Yeah,
You almost
and
need to be
I
a little
say
bit outside
that.
of the window.
Yeah, I say that in a situation where at some point in the past I have been paid to hack just about every 3 and 4 letter agency in the government, from including the FAA and the Patent Office.
I won't ask you about your level of success because that's probably
well, that's okay. I'm good. But you have to judge what you're doing. You have to be careful who you take to hacking school, because the people that you train will hack, and you need to understand that there's generally a line, and that you need to know where that line is. So if you take a job in cyber, what we now loosely call cybersecurity, you need to understand where your employer is telling you this is the line, we approach the line, but we don't cross the line for what we're doing.
So the probably a lot more than when you started. That concept of having a set of ethics or having responsible use of the knowledge that you have in the workforce is actually pretty important now.
Absolutely, because now we actually have legal implications for things like that. And back then, it was the Wild West as far as reaching out to other people's systems and lurking around and seeing what was going on. And most of the people that I have encountered as the security investigator uh, were people who were snooping on other people's research.
Hmm.
Because you can
Let's
do
talk.
something for 10 years and I can publish first and I win.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that piece because we only got a few more minutes left. But
Okay.
I want to get into your investigative work that you did with NRL.
Okay.
How did that come about? Is that something that you actually sought out, or is it just a natural
No,
evolution of your skills?
we were doing a lot of work, and the security office, which is in the command support division, had a problem, and they had a problem with people hacking around, coming into our systems, and they wanted to stop that. And the small staff that they had at that time was a small military uniform staff, and they were not as trained or equipped. And since we were a handful of buildings away on the same facility, they asked a couple of us to go over to help train them and to help them understand how to detect people who were hacking, and then how to look around and really have a real security program that they could implement, to sniff the network and pay attention to who was getting into what systems and what systems came online that simply weren't secured, because most systems came to you out of the box back then just wide open to the world, and you had to go through a process to lock them down.
That's, is that is that something that folks can actually kind of pursue as a deliberate, I guess, workforce focus now? Is getting
Yeah,
into investigations from the get go, or do they still kind of need to work their way up?
I'd say that you need to have a little bit of background to get into the investigative side of it. But now, to get into the investigative side, we have a lot more utilities and tools that are just dropped on people. And I'll say that that's another pet peeve that I have is you need to know what you're doing, not just how to run someone else's utility and look at a report. You need to then be able to understand, how do I tune my utility? How do I know if it's telling me the right thing? How do I know that it's functioning properly? As opposed to I just accept whatever the utility spits out at me.
And Les, as we're coming down to our last couple of minutes, one question I normally ask our guests is what they would do differently if they could go back. I'm going to change that up a little bit for you because I feel like your career path is too awesome to say how would you change it. If you were to come into the workforce today with the knowledge that you have, what would be some of the things that you would do differently than you did based on today's standards for entering the cyber workforce?
Okay, well, I'll tell you, and it's hard for me to say this. It took me a long time to come to grips with it, but I actually tell students now that there are things they should do instead of going to college. I had to go to a land grant university to touch a computer and to learn my skill, and that isn't true anymore. There are so many paths that you can take with data online, systems you can have at home, and resources that you can have access to gain the skill and to then go out and get a job without incurring hundreds of thousands of dollars of college debt. And it hurts me to my core to have to say that, but it's true now. And it wasn't true when I was in school. I had to go to college.
You've seen a lot more opportunities for folks to break into the workforce based on demonstration of skills versus having that
Ab-
credential on the resume.
Absolutely. My own son
That's
is a
good.
great example of that. He has never gone to college, and he has an outstanding job in the industry.
That's awesome. That's actually great to hear because so many people kind of recite the party line, or these are the steps to be successful in the adult world, and it's not necessarily the same anymore or in this industry. So that's actually great to hear. Um, I hate this, but it's trying to condense 40 years of experience into a half-hour program. It's just it's almost an impossible task. which I know you thrive on those challenges, but we are out of time. One thing I'd like to do for anyone that's listening or watches the recording later, if we can go ahead and push up your LinkedIn profile on here. Folks want to reach out to you for the any kind of
Okay.
mentoring or questions down the way. We'll actually have our person in the background take care of that for you.
Okay,
But
that's fine.
yeah, for those listening, Les, sounds like you're a great mentor to a lot of folks in the industry, both upcoming and currently in the workforce. So we'd love to hopefully that you can continue that after this program. But I want to say thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. And for those that are watching or weren't able to get on today, this will be recorded and available on our websites to look at later on. And I just want to go ahead and close by saying that, reminding everyone that the Tortora Brayda Institute and Association of U.S. Cyber Forces are committed to reshaping and empowering diverse collaboration and developing the cyber workforce. And you're the reason why we do what we do. And so we hope today's conversation has helped you on your cyber professional development path. On behalf of Tortora Brayda AUSCF, I want to say thank you. We look forward to having our listeners join us for the next Cyber Workforce Series discussion. And Les, I just want to say thank you again for your time today as well.
Thank you, Nathan. I really appreciate you having me.
Absolutely.